Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.
It's a Tuesday evening edition of Talking Memphis Wrestling, the week after Valentine's Day. It is February the 21st. It's 2022, and we will, from the get-go, tell you stuff going on that usually don't go on that will make this show pretty darn stressful from my point of view today. And from a viewer point of view, it just won't be as pretty, and it won't be as smooth, and it won't be as good. My good friend and the producer of this show, a co-host at times of this show, Adam Dunn, is on his way right now. He's listening on his Apple CarPlay. He can't listen or watch the video because that would be dangerous, but he's listening to every word we see. So that means that I've created the show, I wrote the show, I decided on the creative of this show. Also, I am hosting this show, and I'm also producing this show. I'm no Randy West, I'm no Adam Dunn, and I'm a little nervous about that situation for sure. Brenda says hello. Richard, hey, what is going on? Bobby from Batesville, Arkansas, and I think Chris Ellis is pretty close to there right now as well. David Linville in the house. PJ is in the house from over the pond. My best friend, Randy Dandy, Randy West, with us today on Talking Memphis Wrestling. Jeff Frog Wheeler. Good evening to you, Jeff. Also wanted to say hello to Betty Mead. She says, I love Jerry Jarrett as a wrestler and as a owner. And we'll try later on in the show have Pat Trammell and the rest of the panel step up and help me keep up with all the comments as well. I want to begin by saying I want to thank everybody for all the great words from the show last week, a last minute show that was certainly a sad show based right after the fact we learned Jerry Jarrett had passed away, and Michael St. John was great. He will be here later. He attended the funeral in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and he has us some very interesting information, and we will have that. He may be 15 or 20 minutes late, but certainly I want Chris Ellis and his comments. I want Pat Trammell, and we'll just bring on Chris Ellis first. And just certainly part of our childhood was Jarrett Promotions and Memphis Wrestling, the loss at 80 years old of Jerry Jarrett, and the wrestling community very interested and sad about the situation and interested to know what information we can bring them. Chris, your memories and your thoughts.
Well, Randy, a few months back when we did the Lawler's birthday and Dutch's birthday special, and we honored them, I made the statement that in my mind, they're still 30 years old. And in my mind, Jerry Jarrett still tag teaming with Tojo the first time I ever saw him. And obviously, when I got older, I realized he was the boss and the creative mind and all the things. And I just thought about this today and watching his memorial service. It's 49 years ago since I started watching Memphis wrestling. And so all my youth and my favorite memories, you always remember the wonderful memories you have as a kid. And growing up in Jonesboro like we did, we lived for Saturday. And Jerry Jarrett was responsible for that. He and Jerry Lawler were primarily responsible. Then you, once you became the booker, you were responsible. So those memories will be etched in my mind and in my heart forever. And I certainly want to send my sympathy and condolences to the Jarrett family on the tragic loss of their father, husband, etc. Because it's hard on anyone in this. Anybody loses their parents, it's difficult.
Right on the screen now is Pat Trammell, and we'll have all three of us up right now. And before we have comments with Pat, I want to show everybody something. I want everybody to look at the screen. Last week, the initial reporting by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, Michael, I had him read that to everybody, and it was about a page long, but Meltzer does the full obituary of wrestlers better than anybody I've ever seen. And that is it right there. And I think I emailed it to each one of you guys. I just want to share with you just a little bit. And I thought it was very interesting. This was the lead story, the death of Jerry Jarrett, in the February 20th edition of the Wrestling Observer. It starts like this, in quotes: like leaves driven by the wind, it is a time that is no more. Jerry Jarrett, quoting the movie Gone with the Wind, in a phrase he would use to talk about his glory days as a wrestler, booker, and a promoter. Jerry Jarrett, a former territory headliner, Hall of Fame promoter, and legendary booker, passed away on Valentine's Day at the age of 80 years old. Pat, as with me, maybe not as many years, but you were um, at Jerry Jarrett's house, maybe several different times, was in business discussions with him. Plus, you're as big as a person that's a supporter of Memphis wrestling that there's ever been. And I will say this, that from 1967 to, I would probably say, 1986 or 87. His peak was 87 to, I would say, maybe 82, maybe even 83. Lawler booked that year. But there was no better booker in professional wrestling from the late 60s to, let's say, 1980 than Jerry Jarrett. One of the most creative people ever, certainly for sure. Your comments, and even refer to that opening quote that I gave you with the wind.
Well, it's a sad thing, and I had lost touch with Jerry a little bit the past year or so, but and I regret that, and I think that, and I've just been thinking I needed to pick up the phone and call him, but those things happen to all of us. But you know, I watched the service today, and one thing that struck me, that when I think about Jerry and I think about Memphis wrestling, is, and I've got a little different perspective than you or Chris or even Michael or a lot of our friends on here, in that it wasn't my first wrestling promotion. Um, now the Goulas Welch one was, but I watched a lot more of Georgia before I discovered Memphis, and over the years I've enjoyed learning about other territories and watching those things to YouTube and everything else. And you know, Jerry Jarrett was just different. He was a different person. He was a different promoter. Jeff talked about him reading. And my son and I went up when we were doing a little business with his Hulu channel and spent the afternoon with him and had lunch with he and Deborah. And he was talking to my son, who's 21 now, but I guess was about 17 at the time, about the importance of reading. And he told him that he had read over 2,000 books. And so, and I'm a reader too. Um, and so, the conversation became, how many books have you read? And Wyatt said, well, my dad's got, 300 books. And so we were talking about that. Al, thank you. I enjoyed that too, and I can't get I can't get it to to play anymore, which I regret. But anyway, we talk about that a little later. But we were talking about it, and I said, "Well, Jerry, have you read these books?" And I just rattled off five, you know, obscure but big books. Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is probably a million words, and Shelby Foote's Civil War, which is probably a million words, and all these books, and he had read every one of them. And my point of that is that's what made him different in the wrestling business, because he was so smart and he was so well read and he understood tragedy and he understood comedy and he understood how to translate that into a wrestling angle. And that's why Memphis wrestling, we love it and y'all love it. You grew up with it, but it is just different. It it is uh, it is opera compared to a high school play. It really is, and that's because of Jerry Jarrett.
One of the things, and I guess we should go to the memorial service of today, this morning in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Just real quick thoughts about the memorial service today.
Well, I thought it was a wonderful service. The thing, what Jeff's words were great, but obviously I didn't know who Jeff's sister was, and the letter that she read from her dad to them was heartfelt and just amazing to me, like very touching.
Pat, your thoughts on what you watched since we talked on the phone earlier today?
Those I echo Chris's thoughts. I mean, I thought it was very appropriate that Jeff read some of the things that were important to Jerry, and I didn't know him nearly as well as you did. But if you knew him, you knew those classic kind of things is something he would cling to. And Chris, I agree with you. I'm going to watch that again and write that down because my own kids need to hear that.
One of the things Jeff said, and you can go to My World, the podcast My World on the YouTube channel, and it will be up there. They streamed the ceremony. I meant to get a link, did not do that. I failed to. We had technical problems going on the air. One of the things Jeff explained is that, certainly I'm not going to repeat the whole service, but he explained his dad educated himself by being an avid book reader, and he learned so much and he applied it in his life. And Jeff read 3 poems. By the time this show is over, I am going to read 3 of the ones. First one was from Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena, one of my favorite of all time. From another writer, the poem was called If, and Kipling is the author of that, and then Don't Quit, and that was uh, uh, certainly, and the Edgar Guest was the name of that writer. One of my favorites of all time, and even though one of our Australian buddy was making fun of me, but I need my glasses to see far to read up close. I have to look at this, but what I can do so I'm not made fun of, I can click over here. I can also click right here, and I can put that up, and you can't see what I'm doing. It's Man in the Arena. We'll go to Chris after that, and then to Pat. Again, Pat's a big reader. Chris is an educator. It says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knows neither victory or defeat. That's always been one of my favorites. It's just absolutely fantastic. Start with Chris, Man in the Arena. Your thoughts?
Well, ironically enough, that's one of my two favorite poems because I'm from the athletics world, and when you're a coach and people sit in the stands and critique everything you do, the man in the arena is the one charged with responsibility. So when he read that today, it hit home with me. And the other thing I would add to that is you mentioned Pat being an avid reader. You can see back over my shoulder here that my bookshelf. I own over 500 books still, and I've read them all. And I was taught at a young age that that's how you gain knowledge, especially when you live out in the country. You got three channels on television. You had to entertain yourself. So reading became my thing then and still is. So I respect and admire anybody who does that. But the man in the arena speaks volumes. But to me, about any successful person is not worried about the critic; they're worried about the challenge. And I doubt that Jerry Jarrett lived that every day.
Pat, I'm having to do some emails. Be lengthy in your response to that great poem. I'm trying to get Michael on here.
I am not sure who wrote that poem. It's been attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, I think. Chris, do you know?
Yes,
No,
sir.
that's who did it.
Yeah,
Oh, that
That's
Theodore
who it is.
Roosevelt. Yes, sir.
Roosevelt wrote it. Yeah, yeah. If you think about that, the wrestling business is not like being a banker, which is kind of how I've spent part of my life. Um, you don't know if you're the promoter, you don't necessarily get a paycheck every week, and you got houses that are up and houses that are down, and you just have to keep going. And I Chris, I wish I had more time to read now. I tell my children, when you think it's time for me to leave the house, you just load up a bunch of books and send me off where you want me to go, and I'll be happy as a clam because I've got a lot to catch up on. But um, when you think about if when you think about any wrestling promotion, but Memphis wrestling, which is what we're talking about now, you know, things would go up, things would go down, but Jerry always seemed to be able to find some way to get the house full again. And I was watching something the other day. I think I was listening to Dutch on his podcast with a guy from England, which I enjoy, and they're talking about Austin Idol. And I think Austin Idol is a guy that I really, really enjoyed and liked, and he was in Atlanta some when I was a kid, and I loved him there, and I've loved him in Memphis. But he's a different guy. I mean, the guy's just a different guy, and he just wasn't one of the boys. And I think he was not afraid to hold somebody up for money. Maybe that's where Jeff learned to get Vince. But they would say how the house would be down, and Lawler'd go to Jerry and say, "What do we do?" And Jared would say, "Well, call Austin again." And when he left, he'd tell Lawler, "Don't you ever call him again. He'll never work for me again." And then the house would get down, and they'd go call him. But he always knew what to do. Jerry, I'm talking about. And I, I've got such a unique experience in wrestling and in Memphis wrestling. And most of the angles in other promotions went a month at the most. And as we all know, some of the Memphis angles went for a year. And that just tells you of how smart and how patient and how well Jerry Jarrett could tell a story in a wrestling ring.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. And as I look closer and as we get ready to go to the Arab, Alabama area, and as I said, Michael St. John was able to travel to Hendersonville, Tennessee today, and we have a picture to show you of a couple of gentlemen, and we'll wait to Michael comes back in. But Chris Ellis is with us, Pat Trammell is with us, Adam Dunn is not. I'm hosting and I'm producing. We already read the great poem, Man in the Arena, and that was so good. Welcome to the show, Michael St. John. Glad you made that trip from Arab to Hendersonville safely. So how tough was it? And just let us know today in Hendersonville.
Well, first of all, I've been watching since the program started, and thank you for getting me involved here. At this point, we had a little technical difficulties but we got on, and that's good. Couple of things that, first of all, the poem by Teddy Roosevelt, of course, is probably one of the most quoted sports poems in all of sports, whether it's wrestling, whether it's baseball, whether it's football, whatever, soccer, whatever, or the Olympics. You hear that quote a lot, and as we all called him, the Rough Rider. When you think about it, that's a pretty tender and touching poem by President Teddy Roosevelt. I felt, first of all, I sat with our good friend Danny Davis, who gives his regards to all. Conrad Thompson said to tell you guys hello, and saw a lot of folks there. I thought that the presentation, and I have not seen the replay on YouTube, but I thought the presentation was extremely classy and extremely well done. I know that Jeff and his family had a lot to do with putting that together. I thought the music was unique in that it was Willie Nelson, it was Brooks and Dunn. The music that they sort of used, the music theme between the elements of the funeral. The minister got up and welcomed people at first and sort of ran down what was going to happen with the format. He did the opening, if you would. And then Dave Brown took the stage. And I thought Dave, as always, Dave is a great speaker to begin with a great voice. And he was very eloquent, read a very heartfelt letter from Jerry Lawler, and who, of course, could not be there because of his health situation. Following Dave, a gentleman who had been in business with Jerry in the Dock in the Box places that Jerry opened up at one time, and had been a close friend. Ken, I don't even. My wife has the program, so
the minister's name was Ken Dye.
Okay,
I'm not sure of the other gentleman.
Yeah, I want to say his name was Ken too. I'll double check that. But after that, it was another musical interlude, and then Jeff got up there, and I was I was holding my breath for Jeff. You guys know Jeff and I have been friends ever since he started. Actually, before he started in the ring, and I was holding my breath that Jeff held it together, and he it was hard. And I've been in those shoes. I've been in that shoe, those shoes with when my father passed and having to deliver that soliloquy. I thought he did a very heartfelt and an excellent job. He was very emotional about it. And then his sister got up, and I agree with you, Coach. That was to me the most poignant moment, and that was the moment that I thought that brought the most tears from those that were in attendance, because it was a letter that he had given to his daughter well before the time for him to pass to read when he was being eulogized. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard it and where I heard that it was, and having been somebody that has experienced the nearness of that, I'm going to do that. I'll take that with me from this event. I'm going to write a letter that I'm going to give to my daughter, and I'm going to say when it's the right time, here's the letter. But it was a letter to his kids, and it was so impactful. And he talked about being a hero and bigger in life, and being, not being successful. He talked about times that he was a good father and times that he wasn't a good father, and he sort of weighed both sides of his life. And by the end of it, and it wasn't a long letter, it was maybe a minute and a half. And by the time that it ended, everybody in that crowd you could hear, because we were all choked up by it. And it was one of those events that you really felt like, I really felt good to be there. I felt better when I left there about being there.
One thing I want to point out, Michael, is I'm looking at some of the comments here. Several people has said they're hearing an echo, and I don't know if everybody's wearing headset, that sort of thing. I don't know the situation, but there's an echo. Also, I can hear Michael fine. I'm having no problem hearing Michael. David says, Michael, he can hardly hear you. I can hear Michael fine. If everybody else would let us know if you have problems there, as Chris is obviously off screen there as he's trying to get the headsets, and we see if that will eliminate the echo. And I had noticed that as well. As certainly we know that and Michael was there, so he can tell you that from Jonesboro, Brandon Baxter was there. From Memphis, Dave Brown was there. Michael had told me that Kevin Lawler was there at the service. Well, a couple of names that I wanted to ask, because I knew that you had said Mick Foley was there. I mean, I am curious whether Brian Armstrong, the road dog, was there at the service.
If he was, I didn't see him. Now, the way it was laid out, the receiving line was not up front where the pulpit was, where the ceremony was held. It was at the entrance of the chapel. So we were backed up in the hallway, single file, all the way to the other end of the meeting room at that particular church at Long Hollow Baptist. And what's ironic about it, I literally watched that church be built when I lived up there. I only lived less than 3 blocks away. And for that, in fact, when I lost my dog, we found him in the parking lot of my border collie in the parking lot after 2 days of that church. And it was very poignant, and it was a very solemn. There wasn't a lot of laughing and talking and loudness. It was very solemn before the ceremony. After the ceremony, I think people were more in a collective mood, and it got a little bit more vibrant as far as the speech there. I did not see him. Like I said, I sat with Danny Davis, Tony Falk, and his son was there. Brandon Baxter was obviously just, he was, I have such respect for what he does, not only in the wrestling ring, but what he's done with his broadcast career. He was very kind to me. He kept calling me sir, which I don't get used to.
How about Whoopie D? He told me last night he was going to be there. Whoopie D, and I had heard that Doug Gilbert was planning to go.
Well, if they were, I did not see them. And again,
but that's possible, right? That's possible.
Oh yeah, because it was a large, and it was laid out in sort of a semicircle, but then you had a back area of a smaller area where more of the wrestlers congregated, including myself. Tony Schiavone was there from AEW, and Tony. Tony.
Hey, you're not giving that away on me, are you?
Not yet, but Tony was there, and I understand they took the corporate jet down, brought it up to Gallatin Airport from Jacksonville, and they were headed out to Phoenix right after the event. But as events go, and as many of these that I have attended, and several of those I've spoken with, this was a very poignant event, and that's the picture. You've already hit it up there.
So that's Michael St. John. That's AEW President Tony Khan, and that is Dave Brown. And Dave, of course, spoke, and I thought Dave was just did a fantastic job. I had Dave on the front row with Bud Rowe last Wednesday, and we will replay that. I played it last night on the Power Pro show. We will play it as we conclude this show. But obviously, Jeff Jarrett is employed by AEW Wrestling, and Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone, they were there. And I thought that was very, very nice, just fantastic, fantastic support from the company that he works with.
Well, I want to step in here right now because you've heard me be critical of Tony Khan's company and the wrestling. And what happened after the event, I went up to talk to Dave, and we were talking, and this gentleman came up in a beautiful Mongolian cashmere coat. I know what Mongolian cashmere is. I had two of them. Unfortunately, mine are 40 years old, and his is brand new. And he came up and he spoke to Dave first, and he turned to me and he put his hand out and he says, "Michael St. John, I have always wanted to meet you." He said, "I've admired your work. I loved what you've done on voiceovers." He said, "And I'm honored to meet you." And I was like blown away.
Did you know who he was?
Instantly. And he was daptly dressed. I mean, he looked he has a lot of hair on his forehead. And that was the only thing that threw me a little bit. I said, "Yeah, that's Tony Khan." But for him to come to me out of that crowd and talk directly to me within the presence of Dave Brown, I was honored. I was absolutely honored. And I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to say this publicly. Just a second, Joshua. That I owe an apology to Tony Khan because after talking to Tony, I found out that, and in just the 15-20 minutes we spent with him, it was very obvious that number one, he is a historian of the business. He knows a lot about the business. I was able to actually tell him a couple of things that he did not know. That he was like, "Well, wow, I didn't know that. Thanks." You know, and he was just so he was so complimentary of Jerry Jarrett. He said so much of what he developed as a young boy, as a wrestling fan. He said, "I'm a wrestling mark." He said, "I'll admit it." He says, "But as so much as a wrestling fan back then, I learned from Jerry Jarrett." And he said, "The thing that amazed me about Jerry is how together he was, how meticulous he was, how well informed, and everything was just right to a T. And you never needed to really do show prep because Jerry had already done it for you. And Dave and I, well, Dave first, and I chimed in because that was certainly the truth. Because when we'd meet with Jerry before the shows, whether they be an arena show or whether they be at Channel 5 or for ESPN down in Dallas, Jerry would completely say, "Okay, here's your open. Here's what we need to concentrate on, and then segment one's going to be this. And by the way, here's the points you need to get across. And segment two is going to be an interview with whoever, and then he'd bring them in and explain to them in front of us." So by the time we were over that meeting, and those meetings normally took 20 to 30 minutes, we were really adequately prepared to do what he wanted to do. And at that point in time, it was just a matter of carrying it out. And that was one thing that Tony reflected upon. And he says, "I'm trying to do that." He said, "But it's hard. It's tough." He says, "I spend a lot of time trying to do that." But I was really impressed by his sincerity, his very much down to earth demeanor, and his love. You can feel it in you just it's just like us. When we talk about wrestling, you can hear our passion, you can hear our love. And that's how it was with Tony Khan. So I want to apologize for anything negative I've ever said about the guy. I will give him 100%. In fact, he's agreed to come on our radio stations and do a couple of morning show things with us on the talking about AEW and some of their events. And he said, "I've always wanted to do radio. I love doing radio. Absolutely. You just tell me when." And we exchanged contacts, and I was very, very impressed. If anything that was a surprise to me today, A, I got to meet Tony Khan, and B, I got to like Tony Khan.
Well, that's pretty cool. And we will, in just a minute, have Chris Ellis and Pat Trammell join the conversation, as I did earlier, as we go full screen with me. I think it was just so touching and so great, the poems that were said and shared at the funeral service. And I wanted to let everybody know, and I apologize for not having that link, but you can go to YouTube, the My World podcast, the Jeff Jarrett podcast. Go to My World, and you will be able to watch the streaming of that service today. I'll try a little later on to post it on my Facebook, and hopefully I can do that while this show is going on. Reading was such a big part of Jerry Jarrett's life, and I loved how the fact that Jeff incorporated it into the situation. Now, one thing, Michael, and I'm just going to go ahead and uh, uh, get everybody back on the screen real quick. One of the things that touched me, and everybody watched the service, and the one point in the service that teared me up because Jerry's youngest son is a good close personal friend of mine, Jason. Good friends, and his son Judson, as Pat knows, Judson Jarrett went to the same school his daughter did in Baylor, and so I can relate to that situation. But in that service, in regard to the man in the arena, Jeff was having a conversation with Jason. Said, Jason, I'll read one poem, you read one poem. And Jason said, hey, to be in front of a microphone is your deal, and I'm not comfortable in doing that, but I have a story to tell you. And he told him the story. And it's sad because of of just how life uh, goes, that this story that I'm fixing to tell you, Jerry Jarrett did not know this story, and Jeff said that in his talk. But anyway, Jason explained to Jeff that he had "Man in the Arena" poem framed, and it was in. Jason is a very good amateur wrestler, high school wrestler, and in his workout room at home, his wrestling room at home, he has that poem we all learned the first time. You guys have heard the poem 100 times that I read earlier, but certainly, where I heard it the first time was Jerry Jarrett, and I thought that was uh, just phenomenal. That part of the service, Chris.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, because one, the poem made an impact on the kids, obviously. It's because they were living it out. And two, it showed a respect or a reverence for his dad's legacy and philosophy and how it had impacted him. And to be it furthered that by the fact he didn't share it, he just honored him in a quiet, respectful manner. And I thought that was really cool.
Pat, your thoughts on that part of the service?
You know, and I'll go back to Michael's comments. I think Michael talked about the letter, and that was, that part of the service. I think, if you're a parent, you think a lot about how you have periods with your children where you're at odds, and you have times that you're not proud of how you've treated them, and you have times where you don't understand why they act like they do. Um, and I think Jerry's letter encapsulated what all parents feel. Sometimes you feel like you've done a great thing by them, and sometimes you feel like they would be better off anywhere else in the world. And I think his letter really touched a lot of people in that way. And if you're not a parent, you're a child, and you have feelings for your parents or your father, particularly. That sometimes he's your hero, sometimes he's the last person in the world you want to see. And I think Jerry's letter encapsulated that.
back to the poem, Michael, I felt that Jeff got very emotional in that part of it, and the story he told about Jason having it in Judson's room and Jerry not doing it. That was the point of the service that I shed tears. Your thoughts on that?
I agree. Jeff, I was more, I guess, akin to feeling Jeff's feelings when he was doing that than I was listening to that poem. Of course, I'm aware of the poem and I've heard it and seen it, and of course, read it and studied it and all that good stuff back in college. But I think that Jeff's emotionality really was spot on in this situation. And it's tough. It's really tough to tell to say something to talk about your dad in a moment like that. I unfortunately, or fortunately, let's say fortunately,
Hey,
had that
Joshua.
opportunity. Joshua has just come in. You guys have
Yes.
to excuse me. A minute ago, I left camera because I had wiping duty,
Uh
but
oh.
you can't touch that button. But the one thing that I thought was and it made me think about back when I was doing the same thing at my dad's service, the feelings you go through as a person talking about your dad. And Jeff, didn't have a granddad when you think about it, because
No.
Jerry's father had abandoned them, and
Yes.
he was very much a product of his grandmother Teeny. He was very much a product of Jerry, especially later in life. And you have your ups and downs with your kids, and sometimes the downs are hard to take, and sometimes the ups are not as up as you want them to be. But I think over the past few years, I think Jeff has really, and I'm going to use this, and I'm not hopefully not going to offend him by saying this. I think Jeff Jarrett has really grown up into a great man over the past few years.
He was what one thing I was impressed with, because addiction and negatives and having issues, we all have issues and we all have problems, and Jeff's dealt with that. And once he went into treatment and into recovery, because it's a long going process, Jeff certainly set out to make amends. As he talked in the service, his life was a wreck, his marriage was a wreck, his relationship with his kids was a wreck, everything was a wreck, and he did make amends. And I'm glad that recently Jeff was made it a part to go have lunch with Jerry almost every week, and this has been going on for several years now, a big part of this. And certainly this is lengthy, and I want everybody to bear with me. And my guy from Australia making fun of me for having to take my glasses off to read. I can't read I can't see in a little bit of distance at all. I can't see these comments, but to read these notes, I have to have them in my hand. And this is a lengthy poem. It's by Kipling. We'll start with, after I read it, to Pat, then to Chris, then to Michael. And I thought this was great as as well. I think they're just absolutely fantastic. Again, just absolutely fantastic. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knives to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and neither breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerves to serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, and you'll be the man, my son. The poem called If is by Kipling, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I want to start right now to my buddy Pat Trammell, his thoughts on that wonderful masterpiece.
Well, it just encompasses, you know, it just encompasses what a true human being is, and I'd say what a man is because it's written by a man to a man. But I think it gives everybody something to reflect on, and that's just one of those classic things. And I think Jerry Jarrett was a Renaissance man, and by that what I mean is, I think he had timeless and classic principles about how he lived his life. And yeah, he made a lot of mistakes and he bruised a lot of egos. And sometimes he could be petty, sometimes he could be extremely generous, but he was fully human and he accomplished great things. And I think today's today's um, today was a kind of a culmination of that, and I thought that was just really an appropriate reading.
The poem was If. Your thoughts, Chris?
Well, I've been told all my life by my father, ironically enough, that if is the biggest word in the English dictionary. And I've always taken that to mean if you are willing to take the chances and take on the challenges that are necessary, you can accomplish whatever you wish to accomplish or overcome whatever you wish to overcome. Which in Jerry Jarrett's case, he grew up without a father. He didn't have a lot of money, and he made it by working hard and taking the chances and the opportunities as they came. And then in Jeff's case today, he referred to his sobriety, and like that's a huge challenge. That's a big if. So if you're willing to take the necessary steps. So I think it translates in different ways for all those involved today.
Very good thoughts. The If poem. Had you ever heard that before, Michael? And your comments, the delivery of it, and the reaction from people in that chapel about that.
Well, the answer, first questions first. Yes, while I was in Vanderbilt, I'm an English minor, a psychology major with an English minor, and we actually studied that particular poem for a whole week. And I mean, literally verse by verse. And that is an extremely poignant poem. A lot we talked about, a lot we studied was in Kipling's life, where that poem occurred in his writings and when he wrote that. And a lot of people believe that he may have wrote that to another man because of a relationship with another man. So there's a little history, a little dark history behind that poem. But I thought Jeff did a great job and got the point over. The one thing Jeff said when he started when he got up there at the microphone, he said he learned in rehab that when you complete rehab, the good news is you get your feelings back, but the bad news is you get your feelings back. And I thought that was a very outstanding way to start his presentation. But I'll say this, and Pat, you said he was a Renaissance man. I'll give you this. I think Jarrett was a Renaissance man before we knew what a Renaissance man was. And I can't tell you how many times that I had been with him in either his office or in the car or whatever, and he would say, "Have you read so and so?" I remember emphatically when Richard Nixon's memoir came out, and we were actually on a trip, I think, from either Memphis to Nashville or going the other way, and he had read it cover to cover, and that's like a 1,000-page book. And he would ask, you could tell that he absorbed what he read, because he would ask intelligent questions, or what did he mean by that, and especially if you'd read the book. I don't think he was testing you, but he liked to do comparisons of what you got out of a certain book versus what he read. And I think that addresses the depthness of the man's mind. And there's nothing in fact, this is one thing that I am very poignant on right now in my career. My whole point now is to get people interested in our business, whether it be broadcasting, whether it be professional wrestling commentating, to be that next generation, to understand the past and bring it up to the future and beyond. Because right now, with the social media world and the internet world, we're losing libraries, we're losing people's ability to read. We're obviously losing people's ability to communicate one-on-one, whether it's via a screen like this or in a place of a school or wherever. And I think society's got to work on honing our next generation, and that's sort of my goal ever since last year and everything that I went through. My renaissance is to help create that next era. And I think Jeff Jarrett is that next era. And I think Jeff's kids and
I don't know what happened to Michael. Hold
I'm
on.
here.
There we go.
I'm just saying that I think it's just very, very important that an event like today, where poems were on showcase, where music was on showcase, where readings and letters and communication was on showcase. I get your heart, folks.
It absolutely does. And a lot of people, and Connie Cook, if you're watching on Facebook, she posted the link. But it's real simple, folks. If you have YouTube, go to the Jeff Jarrett My World channel, Jeff Jarrett My World. That's who recorded the thing and put it on a stream. I wasn't aware. As a matter of fact, I heard from Jeff a couple of days ago, because Jerry Lawler was wanting to see that service. And so I was asking Jeff, will it be recorded, blah, blah, blah. And he said, it won't be. He said, as of this point, it will not be streamed, but there will be, Conrad's team will put stuff together and it will eventually be out, and we'll make sure Jerry Lawler gets it. But just randomly, I was looking at YouTube and it came up there, and I was able to text different people. So that's my advice to everybody right now. I meant to have it where I could post it, but Connie, if anybody could post a link and Facebook, and go ahead and do that there. If you happen to have the link, it's from the My World Jeff Jarrett podcast. You can go to YouTube and see that there, and it's there as well. Just a emotional day. And one thing that I'm concerned with, one thing I'm interested in the kids, especially the younger kids. Jason's kids, his little boy is Jude, of course, Ava, and Ava, I'm sure, was there, and then Judson was there, and then Jennifer's kids, and Jennifer has Jarrett, and has Jackson, and has Blakely, and then of course Jeff has 5 kids and as well. How are the kids doing? Is my point.
First of all, they were dressed appropriately, which in a lot of times in a funeral, you go to a situation and the kids sort of are running wild and doing all sorts of things that aren't very emotional like or funeral like. Not this case. They were they were part of the whole event. At no point were they unruly. At no point. At the very end, I did see Jeff's wife Karen take them. They went out into the foyer, and I think a couple of them may have gone to the restroom or whatever. But absolutely, the class, just the whole event, just immediate or just it was just class. It just mediated and relegated, or not relegated, but it was just class, and you felt it while you were there. And you got people that were there that were in the wrestling business, such as, well, or attached to it, like Conrad, like Brandon, Mick Foley, Danny was sitting there, and George Weingroff. I haven't mentioned George, who was an old friend, was there. They were very touched by the ceremony. At no time did you see people whispering or talking while things were going on. The attention was all about what was happening at the pulpit. And I got news for you. I've, as a sideline, I do eulogies for friends and family, and uh, it's rare that you get everybody's complete attention for the duration. And this duration was about an hour and 45 minutes of tribute, and at no moment were you let down by it.
Yes, one of the things, there was people there and a good crowd there, and you said that it was set up uniquely. Did you? I might have asked you this question before, but did you have the opportunity to say hello to Diane?
No, I did not. In fact, I think I saw Diane, but at the end of the ceremony, everybody either went to the foyer or went forward towards those that had spoke. I wanted to see Dave Brown. Dave and I go back, as you well know, a long way, and the last time, unfortunately, the first thing we said to each other, the first thing we brought up was, Dave said, "Well, the last time I saw you was at a funeral." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "It was that of Brian Lawler's," and we all would like to get together and meet each other and share our common love for this business and for each other in situations other than funerals. But it gets to the point in your life that my dad always said to me, he said, "You'll know you're getting old." My dad said this, and I don't quote my dad a lot. I quote my grandfather a lot. I don't quote my dad a lot. But my dad said, "You'll know you're getting old when you go to more funerals than you do weddings." And he's absolutely right.
One of the things I want to share, and it's the last one that I will share today because it was just such a big part of that service. You can go to the My World podcast and check that out. And this is certainly one that began Jeff Jarrett's career. And Jeff, when he started wrestling, he wasn't too keen on this idea because you know how 18-year-old kids are. They're not into poetry at all. And his dad laid out the interview, gave him the poem that's called Don't Quit, and produced this interview segment that our friend Randy West oh, did the camera work and then edited it together. And Jeff had to do this at 18 years old. And this is a great thing will come out of it. If Pat's not back, we'll go with Chris. And Chris certainly been in athletics as a participant, as a coach, as an athletic director, and now in administration. This is just such great advice from everybody for everybody that we can all be better people with. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low, but the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is strange with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns. And many failures turn about when we might have won had we stuck it out. Don't give up through the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Success is failure turned inside out. The silver tint of the clouds of doubt. You can never tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It when some things worse that you must not quit. And I think that's just absolutely fantastic. I think there is certainly no doubt about that. Chris, we'll go with you first, then Pat, comments on the I quit point.
Well, you mentioned that my background in athletics. Obviously, I've heard that poem many times, utilized it myself. Excuse me. Um, but the biggest thing is, I think it teaches us all about the time you get ready to quit, you may only be one step away. I always use the analogy of the old Tootsie Roll, Tootsie Pop. You know, how many licks does it take to get to the center? About the time you quit, you'll never know. So I'm going to step off for a minute.
All right, and Chris goes away for a second. Your comment, Pat Trammell. We need your audio on, please.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry I had to step away too.
That's okay.
Jeff made a good point about Jerry when he said he was kind of self-educated because he didn't have a father, and and I had a father that I learned a lot from. Um, sometimes some things I learned from him is what not to do, but anyway, I think Jerry got a lot about where he was from reading and those kind of poems, and a lot of us get things from what we've read over life. And I remember I went and as y'all know, I had a small business for a number of years, and I had a partner who was a silent investor, and he had been phenomenally successful. And I was pretty down and just could not make it work. And I went to him and sat down, and he said, I asked him, I said, John, did you ever just want to quit? He said, yeah, I wanted to quit every day, but said, I mean, who was going to do this if I didn't? And that always struck with me. And I think that has a lot more to do than about you know than financial success or whatever you call it. I think in your life you just have to keep going every day. And Jerry did that. And I think if you're a wrestling promoter, and Randy, you know this better than I do, and Michael, you've seen it more than I have, and Chris, uh, you don't never know. It can turn with just one more card, and that card can be a wrestling card or it can be a card of fate. And I think that's what Jerry was getting at.
Very good comments. I'll tell you where we are in the show right now. We're going to just have everybody, and we'll start with Chris, as we spent 2 hours last week talking about Jerry Jarrett. Michael and I were the only two that was on the show today, and I appreciate all the comments about that show. And then I had a show scheduled, and we went ahead and changed it last week. And then again, I had a schedule today, but so many comments about the memorial service and all that sort of thing, I knew we had to cover that. So this is what we're going to do. Everybody's going to have sum up Any comment? Anything you want to say about Jarrett? You can say that. We'll go Chris. We'll go Pat. We'll go Michael, and then certainly I may sneak in there with some comments as well. But then we at this point will not be the full 2 hour show today. We did a great interview with Dave Brown last Wednesday, the day after the death of Jerry Jarrett, with Dave Brown on the radio show I do on Wednesdays, Front Row with Bud Rowe at 953theticket.com. And this is about 20 minutes that Bud and I did an interview with Dave. And so that's coming up. I played the thing last night on the Power Hour. We're going to play it again today. So just wanted to give all of our panel members my direction of what we're going to do to the show. Sum it up, Chris.
Well, the biggest point I took from today after taking off my lens as a fan, Jeff Jarrett and I are the same age. Our fathers are I still have my father, but he's about 5 years older than Jerry Jarrett. And I can relate to Jeff, and I'm going to speak at my father's funeral when that day comes. And I hope I can do as well as he did, but I can relate to him in the fact of the ups and downs I've had with my own father, being at the same stage of life. And it hit home with me that time's coming a lot sooner than I would hope.
It's just this life that we live is just something. And I think there's nobody in this room right now, whether it's the panel, whether it's Michael St. John, whether it's Chris Ellis, Pat Trammell, or certainly Randy Hills, or none of the great people that's watching. Life is full of up and down. And I think one thing we did with the three things, the pieces of business that we shared with everybody today, folks, if that doesn't inspire you, absolutely. I think if you just need to open your heart, it's real easy, especially with social media and especially with all the negative in the world, the negative in the news. Certainly Jonesboro, so the last several days, we used to have a murder in Jonesboro, every 10 years, maybe, Chris?
Maybe, yeah.
And now it's several times a week. And I'm thinking, if these people would have been brought up and the in the arena and the F and the if thing, everything we're seeing, because we all have issues and we don't like everybody and everybody don't like us, and it's just human nature to absolutely to have some people you just don't want in your life, and you go to, just don't go to your death, folks. Or maybe it's not your death. Don't let somebody die that you hadn't told them that you love them. Sum up your feelings there, Pat Trammell, my friend from Birmingham.
Well, I love you, and
I
I
love
love
you too,
Michael,
man.
and I love Chris, and I love all our friends on here. I didn't know Jerry as well as you and Michael did, but I did get to spend some time with him, and we had several late night Sunday night phone calls that I appreciate. And thank you, PJ. Love you too. And you know, I've always loved history, and Jerry loved history, and we talked about that. And with Jerry Jarrett, we lived through what he did. We lived and we live every week the history of something we love. And I kind of realized that today. And I'm thankful for his life. We will not see his likes again. And I was just glad to be a very small part of it. And I'm glad that uh, what he accomplished lives on for us, and to some extent through us and through all our friends here, and something we can enjoy and talk about for generations to come, and share with our children
One
and
of the
other
things,
people.
one of the things, Michael, I want you to address. because you've done it and you do it still today. Come into the homes through the radio on your fun radio station. And we need to plug, because I have people ask me all the time, is there a place on the wide world web, on the internet, that they can check out your stations? I do as well. We need to address that. But one thing I also think we need to realize, that from our standpoint, and I'm speaking for Michael and myself, for somebody that has in the public eye and done radio and done television and all the wrestlers. At the same time, Michael, I really think that people certainly don't get to know us as human beings. And I think that's where the direction that the last several weeks show has been going. And we had, starting with the Jay Briscoe story in the middle of our broadcast and other stories. I think it's very important to do that, because people, when there's people that's on TV, it's easy to take shots of them. It's really easy to take shots at people, but you just don't know the people. We're not talking. Let's just take Jerry Jarrett, the wrestler, out of the equation. Let's take Jerry Jarrett as the genius booker, as the promoter, out of the equation. And whether the relationships are real good, Jerry or not, you can look at the relationship. Jerry Jarrett had an amazing relationship with his mother, Christine Jarrett. Married Deborah Marlin for 51 years. Then so many children and great grandchildren and grandchildren and the whole. I don't want to panic Deborah. I don't think there's any great grandchildren that I know of. But as a matter of fact, certainly on the Randy West Diane Marlin side there is. So the family's growing. So I'm rambling to get that point. If you could follow up and sum up the Jarrett story and the last couple of weeks and today and the great group we have here, and then we will go. And if anybody wants to go away, as far, I'm not telling the audience you got to listen to Dave Brown, it's great. But if any of you guys have to go, certainly Michael's heard Dave Brown a million times, and I understand it's getting late. But this is all on as we go up front. I miss Adam Dunn producing this show. Adam, I understand you have a sick wife, but good God Almighty, this is hard. Michael St. John, everybody.
Randy, it's been a long day. I've been up since 5 a.m. and making this trip and going through the emotional roller coaster that a event like this gives you. In summation, I think Jerry Jarrett was a good man. And when I hugged Deborah when I first came in this morning, and I looked at her and she looked at me and she knew me but didn't know me. And I said, I'm Michael St. John. And then, oh my gosh, tears flowed. And we started reflecting on Jerry for a few moments. And one of the things that came up was that Jerry had a real passion for people. And, there were times that he had to be stern, and there were times that he had to do things that were unpopular with his own self to do to survive in the business of whatever business he was in. But I think the greatest thing to be said about a man or a woman upon their passion is they were a good person. And I think that's the best way I can sum up Jerry Jarrett in a few words. But I think that Jerry lived by great virtues: chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, kindness, patience, humility. We learned about those in our church studies, but it's when you put those things into play into your everyday life. Faith, he had it. Hope, he was full of it, because think about all the opportunities that he tried, many of which he succeeded, some of which he failed. And love. And he had a lot of love, whether it was for the business, for the people in the business, for his family. He was a good man. And I think that is the best way to sum up Jerry Jarrett. And I'm going to just quickly give you a little. I'm one of the people that believe, and I have been raised in an environment of Christian faith all of my life. I fell away from it because of some outside influences. I had a God event that happened in my life that saved my life, that brought me back to it. But I believe in this world, you talk about the Spirit of God in whatever we do. And I do believe that God's Spirit is all with us every day, every moment of our lives. But I also believe that those who have touched our lives, that have left this world, have gone into a place of, people call it heaven, tranquility. But I believe that their aura, I believe that their spirit, I believe that the knowledge that they have imparted to us stays with us every day of our life. And as I said, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, Randy, but Conrad Thompson had asked me to do a piece about Jerry for a very nice thing that he did with his podcast. And he had people from The Rock to me, and all in between. And one of the things I really made it a point to say, I made a very poignant, it's my big word tonight though, but I made a big deal to say is, may he rest in peace. May Jerry Jarrett rest in peace. And may his memory and his influence and his spirit rest with us the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's very powerful and strong words. We've spent 2 weeks. Certainly, we mentioned Jerry Jarrett's name on every show, certainly of Talking Memphis Wrestling anyway, and we will continue to do it next week as we go back to the timeline to 86 or 87. We'll get up to about 1990, and then we're going to do spotlight shows. I don't think I told you guys we'll do Tojo Yamamoto, we'll do Jackie Fargo. We'll go back, and just like we started the timeline with the 70s, we'll go and try to spotlight these great wrestlers. The further back we go, the least amount of video we'll have. I can tell you that right now, but it'll be a good thing. So I just wanted to see if any of you guys, who's sticking around, who's going away for the Dave Brown interview. It's a 20-minute interview, and then certainly we'll do a wrap up. But just let me know what's going on. Thumbs up, thumbs down. You got to go.
I've got to go. I'm going to follow it, though. I'm taking my phone. I'm going to follow it on Twitter. And by the way, you can get this feed on Twitter. We haven't mentioned that in a while, Randy. You can get the feed of this show on Twitter, which is excellent, by the way. So I will listen to it while I'm upstairs. I have a grandson that is
won't you?
Has been wanting Pawpaw since I walked in the door at 5 minutes till 7. So I better go check on him. God bless everyone. Thank you, folks, for all the wonderful comments. You folks, you are so special to us. I don't think we say that enough, but thank you so much. And if you've got a friend that's a wrestling fan, or even a friend that's a fan of talk about the old times, turn them on to this podcast, because Randy does a fabulous job. I had 2 or 3 people that mentioned this very event, this very show on Tuesday nights to me today. And Randy, and to Pat, and to Coach, we couldn't do it without you guys. I mean, I couldn't do it without you guys. And Randy, again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity and the love, and love you guys. Like you're all part of my family. And Randy, you know, I love you like a brother, my friend. And I just want to be very, very poignant. Again, my big word today. I want to be very upfront about the fact to thank you, Randy, and to thank you, Coach, and to thank you, Pat, for allowing me to be part of this event every Tuesday.
Thank you, Michael. Love you. And certainly let's throw in, because it's the Four Musketeers, even though one of us is not on screen very much. We miss Adam Dunn. Prayers to Adam and Allison tonight. Is Allison has the flu, and she's stuck in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's the 12 hours from there in Georgia. He's driving to get her because she can't fly, and bringing her home. So everybody pray for Adam Dunn in his travel. Thank you so much, Michael.
Love you guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. And Chris, you say you got to go, right?
I got to go. 5 o'clock's going to be here early, so I'm going to slide out. But thanks to all of our viewers. They make all this possible. Pat and Randy and Michael mentioned it. I'm just blessed to be a part of this. Thankful to call you guys friends. Love you all and just blessed, just truly blessed.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Love you, Chris. All right. You staying with me? Need your audio, Pat.
Yes, sir, I am.
You're staying with me, right?
Yes, sir.
So this is, I'm going to put you full screen. It's a 20-minute video. After we come out of the video, we'll come back to you because you will be the person full screen on the screen. I'm doing a little production stuff, technical stuff, so Pat will know as well. So talk about anything you want to talk about for about 20 seconds, and then I want you to pitch to the Dave Brown video on the front row with Bud Rowe. Bud and I did with Dave last Wednesday about Jarrett and Dave Brown's career. I think it's good, but you're going to have to give me about 15 or 20 seconds to find it, and then go ahead and pitch to it, and then I'll play it. Okay.
All right. Well, one thing I wanted to say is I just wanted to thank everybody for being here every week, and I think our crowd of friends and family here. It's our little family's getting bigger and bigger, and it really means a lot to me to see your comments. And Michael, we've got a private chat thing on here, and I feel bad that I can't respond to your chats, but you can't do it if you're somehow in the show, but I read them all, and I know Randy and Michael and Chris read them all, and you guys mean so much to us. I mean, this would not be worth doing without you here, and I've become friends with a lot of you through this, and I'm really, really, really thankful for that. And at times like this, you kind of realize how much this particular little corner of the world means to you. And, my Memphis wrestling family means a lot to me. And thank you all for being here. And Randy, I think I've given you 20 seconds, and hopefully we're going to hear the interview with Dave Brown and Randy on.
Front Row Media, in cooperation with East Arkansas Broadcasters, presents On the Front Row with Bud Rowe. Phone lines are open now at 930-3776. Toll free at 866-930-3776. First-time callers get free food and a really hard time. Now, here's your host of On the Front Row with Bud Rowe, Bud Trammell.
Third and final hour this day on the Front Row. Excuse me, powered by Evolve Bank and Trust, everything you never expected from a bank. Presented by Alexander's Machine Shop, your job shop machine shop. We're the Ticket Radio Network, 970 AM, 95.3, 96.9 FM, 104.1 FM in Clarendon, Arkansas, worldwide on the web at 95.3theticket.com. Over there is Randy Myers. Over here, Bud Schroepel and Randy Hales getting ready to get to you-know-what. But first, want to tell you tomorrow we'll be at First Community Bank. We'll have Sean Cockrell and Holly Cockrell on at 7 o'clock, the upcoming coaches for the all-star teams of football and dance. At 8 o'clock, we'll be joined by Matt Mills from Rector, the boys coach out there. And then at 9 o'clock, C.J. Pepper and Kevin Tuberville will join us on the front row. But now it's time for
Power Pro Wrestling.
I do that better than you do.
I agree.
Power Pro Wrestling.
He's here. It's Randy Hales from Power Pro Wrestling. Sad day today. Sad day.
You know what I was just thinking, Bud? This has become a routine. 4 weeks in a row. First of all, we broke the news on the passing of Jay Briscoe, and then following that, we broke the news of the passing of Lanny Poffo. Then last week, we had to talk about the medical situation that Jerry Lawler was in. And today, we are obviously talking about the inventor of the classic Memphis wrestling style, one of the smartest people in the history of Memphis wrestling. Jerry Winston Jarrett passed away yesterday morning at a medical facility. It was a sad situation. I wasn't aware of the fact, but he had developed throat cancer, is what I
didn't know that.
understand.
That's terrible.
And he was at the hospital near his home in Franklin, Tennessee, to have chemotherapy. In that chemotherapy, he had a heart attack and he passed away. Jerry Jarrett passed away at 80 years old. I'm very happy to not only share memories with the Front Row faithful and you, Bud and Randy, but also in just a few minutes, I had said, so I'm kind of giving an audio cue to Randy anytime you want to call. I told him 9:10, but we can do the call anytime we get him on the air, and Bud approves it because it is Bud's show that he makes a habit of making sure I know every week, every time he vetoes one of my ideas.
How many ideas have I vetoed of yours? Be honest.
None.
Thank you.
There's one, though, you might have vetoed, but I didn't confirm it anyway, but we won't get into that. But you had just told me that, and I completely 100% understand.
Oh, my goodness. All right. He's talking to him, so you want to do a slow introduction or a fast introduction? There you go.
You know, I'm real thrilled to death, and I'm tickled to death, Bud, that you and Randy allowed me into this studio that's right next to Brandon Baxter's studio for the last 140 weeks. I'm thrilled to death to be able to have on the phone, even though we're going to talk about a sad situation, a member of the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame 2 different times. He is a member of the Tennessee Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He's a broadcasting legend. He's my good friend. Want to welcome for the first time to the Front Row with Budrow, my buddy, Dave Brown. What's going on, Dave?
Hey there, Randy. Well, not a lot going on right now, as a matter of fact. Sad news yesterday, but I did get some good news yesterday. A quick update before we talk about Jerry Jarrett. Jerry Lawler, a mutual friend, talked to Jerry yesterday, and he continues to improve nicely. So I know all the fans want to know about that.
Oh, it's a blessing. It's a blessing, Bud. Anything to start off with?
Listen, I think of Jerry Lawler, and I think back to what happened during that wrestling show a couple of years back, and how pretty quickly he recovered from that one. And then this one comes up, and he's already back home. He, as Dave said, he's talking better. He's doing better. He's an incredible guy. He really, really is.
He really is. He's at his home in Florida. He's going to be down there. He can't travel for a few weeks, but he's looking forward to getting back to his home in Memphis.
Well, Dave, it's good to talk to you today. How have you been doing?
Well, doing fine. Staying busy most of the time and enjoying life retired.
Yeah, I can't imagine you being retired, though, and just sitting around the house. That doesn't happen, does it?
Well, not sitting around the house so much. I do a little bit of that, but I've got several things going on. But a night like maybe coming up tonight, I am so glad I'm retired because I don't have to spend the night at the television station.
You getting some weather tonight, Davey?
There's probably going to be some weather tonight. They've put us under an enhanced risk for severe weather, which out of 5 is a 3, and it's possible that stuff could happen.
You know, one of the things that I want to let everybody know, and I've said this before and said on my social media, I love Ryan Vaughn at Channel 8, and I love the people that do weather here at this station. But just a couple of weeks ago, I had a Uber trip to Memphis, and I was a little worried about the weather. I don't call Ryan Vaughn. Don't have his phone number. My personal weather guy is Dave Brown, and he basically didn't answer the phone, but then he called me back immediately, but I was in the grocery store, so he left a voicemail. And Dave, that voicemail, I played it to my buddy Adam Dunn and other people, just gave me chills. You must have been looking at that computer, man. It was like the good old days at Action News 5. I appreciated that advice, and you told me it was safe to make that trip, and I did, and I made it home safe. I appreciate it.
Very good. Glad to help out there, Randy, and, we're never wrong.
Oh no, absolutely wrong, and certainly one of the false narratives that somebody broadcast, and Dave will agree with me that it was a false narrative. Said one time Dave missed a forecast, which he didn't miss anyway, ever in his entire career. But a guy came in to the studio and punched Dave
I was just
in
thinking
the
about that.
face, and that did not happen. So you can verify that for me, Dave.
That did not happen the way that story. I've heard at least, I would say at least 30 versions of that story, maybe more, and none of them are true. It's only partly true. Guy came into the television station and go from there, but had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with the weather, had nothing to do with the wrestling.
All right, Dave, you go all the way back to the very beginning, for me anyway, moving back to Memphis in 1972, and wrestling was on Channel 13, and you were involved in it, and Jarrett was involved in it, and you go right back to the beginning of Jarrett in the Memphis wrestling promotion.
Yeah, I started doing commentary with Lance Russell on Channel 13 in January of 1967. And, of course, a few years later is when Jarrett and Tojo came in as a tag team, and they became a big part of the promotion.
Yeah, it's just an interesting situation when you go back. I watched wrestling on Channel 13, and we will talk about Jarrett. But one of the things I remember, Dave, I loved you because certainly you were on the wrestling show, and I watched that. But I discovered you on Channel 13, especially in the summer when I wasn't at school. You hosted the Dialing for Dollars movie on Channel 13. What years did you do that, Dave?
I did Dialing for Dollars beginning. I went full-time from radio into television in October of 1968. So I did Dialing for Dollars from then up until about 1973, 4, something like that, when Joe Dyer took over. They promoted me to chief meteorologist, so I couldn't get there at 7:30 in the morning and stay there till 11 o'clock at night. So somebody else took over Dialing for Dollars.
When did the weather gig start at Channel 13? Then, of course, you moved to Channel 5, and there with Mason and also with Jack Eaton, the whole crew. But what year was that, Dave, that you started doing weather?
I started doing weather on the noon news in May of 1972. And then I think it was probably maybe January, February, March of 73. They wanted me to become the chief meteorologist and do the big shows early evening and late evening.
But you never got away from the wrestling. You never got away from the wrestling.
No, never did. I enjoyed it. It was good. And you could never do that these days. The bosses would never permit it. But wrestling was the first TV I ever did. And I could just divorce myself from weather on Saturdays and do the wrestling show. And the audience went right along with it, which tells me that a lot of times consultants for television news don't know their audience near as well as they claim to, because it worked for me, and if it worked for me, I don't say it'll work for everybody, but it'd work for other people too.
Dave, tell the story to our listeners here on the Front Row with Budrow as you're on the right fiber hotline. Tell the people how Lance Russell came to you and approached you about doing television, and he was a program director at Channel 13.
He was the program director in addition to hosting the wrestling show every Saturday. He was the number 2 man in the building right behind the general manager. And I was on the radio one Saturday afternoon doing my radio show, and he came in and sat down and he said, Davey, he said, the guy who's helping me on the show, his name was Dale Mullins, he said, Dale is leaving. He's going back to his hometown and work at the radio station there. I need somebody to help me out on the show on Saturday. He said, I don't know how you feel about wrestling. I don't know if you love it, hate it, or don't care one way or the other. But I will tell you this, if you ever think you might want to do television, you should take this job, because it will let you find out if you like television, and it will also let you find out if television likes you. And some of the best advice I ever got, and I did, and just couple of weeks later, went on the air with Lance on Saturday. And the wonderful thing about Lance, he brought me along slowly. He said, "Don't feel like you have to do anything." He said, "You just say things when you're comfortable saying them." And so I was able to work into it slowly. And of course, being mentored by the best ever certainly didn't hurt.
What radio station, if you don't mind me asking, Dave, were you at when all this transition to TV came about?
No, WHBQ. They were AM, FM, and TV in the same building.
Yep.
And, I was a rock and roll DJ there for 4 years as I worked my way through college and loved it. I mean, I love playing rock and roll on the radio. But I decided it was time to try something else, and thank goodness television worked out.
Well, that was Wink Martindale. Did he come through there?
He did. Wink had already left when I got there. I got there in 1964. Wink had gone to California in 1958. Jack Parnell was my radio mentor there. George Klein, my good buddy, and several other guys. Yeah,
Bob McLean came through there. I remember he was on the air when I first moved back to Memphis. I loved his morning show. It was way before Rick Dees ever thought about being Rick Dees.
Yeah, that's very true. Rick was in North Carolina at the time. Yeah, both Bob McLean and Rick Dees worked at WHBQ.
Yep.
Now, they were working in radio after I was already
you were already gone.
You
were already gone by then.
But
wow.
But we were in the same building, so I saw them all the time.
You know, I never thought the FM stuff would work. I always thought AM was the baby. It never was going to be any good. This FM thing, that's going to be a fly-by-night thing. I believe I was kind of wrong on that.
Well, a lot of people didn't think it was going to work because all the FM stations played was elevator music.
Right.
But WMC FM 100, the program director there had worked at WHBQ, and he went to New Orleans and then came back, and he convinced the general manager to try rock and roll. He said, "I believe it will go," and it did.
Hey, he's a genius.
He was a genius. There's no doubt about it.
Dave, I had a question for you because the wrestling show at 13, then it got better at Channel 5 with the ratings. How much did it go hand in hand? When it was at Channel 13 news was doing real good. Then it went to Channel 5, and Channel 5 for 20 years was the number one station in the market. How much did the station help the wrestling company? How much did the wrestling company help the television station, or did it go hand in hand?
It went hand in hand. The wrestling show. At one point in the early 1980s, we moved over there in March of 1977, and in the early 1980s, keep in mind there weren't that many television stations, no cable and satellite, but on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, of all the television sets in this entire area that were turned on, 80% of them were watching wrestling.
Say that one more time, the percentage.
80% of the it was an 80 share. It wasn't the rating, it wasn't all the TVs, but it was all the televisions that were turned on, and that's not just Memphis. That's northeastern Arkansas, West Tennessee, and North Mississippi.
Dave, we don't have much time left with you. I do want you to give a little talk about Jerry Jarrett and just what a genius he was in the wrestling business and how important the wrestling promotion was to Jerry Jarrett.
He was indeed a genius. He was meticulous. He would come in, we would have a meeting every week before we went on the air with the show, and Jerry would go over the show step by step by step. So Lance and I knew the storyline when we walked out into the studio, and it was just our job to convey it to the audience, which was very easy to do after Jerry had laid it all out. He also was very smart, and he laid the groundwork before he ever took over the wrestling company. He got first Jerry Lawler on his team, and then he got commitments from virtually all the other wrestling stars, other than Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto. They didn't come at first, but he got all of them set up, and then when he started his company, he went to Channel 13 first. Channel 13 said, "No, we can't do it." Corporate in New York said, "We'll get sued by Goulas." So they canceled the show. So they went over to Channel 5 and convinced Channel 5 to put it on. One thing that I've always found amusing, Jerry Lawler, Jerry Jarrett told the general manager at Channel 5, not only do we have this top-rated show, we've got Lance Russell who's going to be working for us, and we can get Dave Brown over here. Well, I knew nothing about that, but it did end up working out that way, and it was great.
I remember watching a Saturday morning before you got there. Clay Conrad was doing it. Yep. Then, of course, Lance Russell came around, and I watched that they were panning the studio, and they went a little bit too far, and you were standing over by one of the exit doors standing there, and I told my wife at the time, I said, you just wait. In a couple of weeks, Dave Brown's going to be on the Saturday Morning Wrestling Show. He's going to come to TV5. I said, well, you're out of your mind. You don't even know what you're talking about. I was a genius that time, Dave.
There you go. Well, it worked out, and I'm thrilled it did. I had a wonderful career at Channel 5 in wrestling and in weather, and I'm just so grateful. And Jerry Jarrett played a key part in that. I'm so sorry for Jeff, for Deborah, for the entire family. And, we'll go on, but it's sad.
Dave, I also want to say you were a big part, along with Corey Macklin with Power Pro Wrestling. We had a lot of fun together, and I appreciate you doing that for us from 98 to 2001, 154 shows.
Hey, you know what, Dave? Not very many people can say they worked beside both Jack Eaton and Charlie B. Watson.
That's exactly right. Both of them were great guys and great friends. I miss them to this day.
I know you do. Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I hope we can do this again some other time. I've admired you from afar, got to know you a bit, and certainly enjoyed knowing you. Good luck to you and everything that you're doing, and thank you for joining us on the front row.
Thanks, my friend. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave Brown joining us in the Power Hour. Good to talk with him. Good talk with him. All right, we're going to take a break. Randy Hales here. We'll continue our wrestling talk. We're going to talk about Sid Vicious when we come back, about whether or not he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, in your opinion, this year.
He should.
Well, there you go. There's your opinion right there. It's 9:25 on the Ticket Radio Network.
Your own, Pat.
Well, it was good to hear from Dave, and of course he was such a big part of the story of Memphis wrestling, as was you, as was Jerry, as was Lawler and Tojo. And I think when I found out Jerry passed, I found a picture of him and Tojo just casually being together and said, well, it's a sad day, but I'm sure those two are glad to see each other again. And I know that, people may not know this, and I know we want to get off here in a minute, but I don't think people knew how close Jerry and Tojo was, and how much Tojo meant to Jerry. And if you listen to interviews with wrestlers from four or five different decades that worked in Memphis, including Stone Cold Steve Austin and Jeff and others, Tojo meant so much to them, to their development. And I remember sitting on Jerry's back porch and we were talking, and Tojo came up, and Jerry talked about when Tojo ended his life, and I mean, he teared up 40 years later. And I'd like to think there's a place we all go and we can see the people we loved, and I hope those guys are having a nice reunion.
Thanks for being with us, Pat. The show was off of a sad situation, but certainly I'm hoping and praying we did it justice, and you added a lot to this team every week. Thank you for talking about Jerry Jarrett. Missed you last week, and you hated not to be here last week, knowing what the show was going to be. But thanks for coming back and being with us today, Pat.
Well, thank you all, and thank you all for being here, and I love you all.
Pat Trammell, everybody, a big part of this show, and we appreciate Pat very much, and he'll be back with us next Tuesday night. I hope. Again, I want to thank Chris Ellis. I want to thank Michael St. John. The great information that Michael did travel today, in a situation that I had this morning. I had a doctor's appointment, and I have a follow-up that I have to go in for some a little work at the hospital Sunday morning. So keep a prayer for me, as that will be coming up this Sunday. And the doctor was a little concerned of a little heartbeat type of situation, and we will have that done coming up Sunday, and we'll do that Sunday morning at 8:15. So prayers there. This has been a great show. You guys make a great part of this team. I am going to click real quick over to the great Al Tuttle, and I will put him up there real quick. Said, Pat, if you hadn't seen it before, I keep hearing from different people on podcasts that I listen to that Bob Backlund's autobiography is really good. Forward by Roddy Piper, and Al's going to get it. And so that is a little instructions from Pat, and I'll let Pat respond to that real quick. Pat, a little book recommendation for you.
I think Abraham Lincoln said my best friend's the one that gives me a book I ain't read. So I'm going to get that, Bob. Gerald Briscoe and I had a back and forth on Twitter about Bob Backlund, and he says I underrate him, but I'm going to get that and read that. Thank you so much, Al.
Thank you, Pat, for being on today. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I missed Adam Dunn. He does such a great job producing this show. And I'm telling you, people, it might not be hard for Adam, but it's hard for me to try to produce and direct and hit the buttons and bring this person in and bring that person in. But we do it for you. We do it because it's my mission, and it's always been my mission to keep the legacy of Memphis wrestling alive. Tomorrow morning, as you heard, the interview with Dave Brown we had last week from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. I'm on the Ticket Radio Network, and you can get it on the World Wide Web at 953theticket.com. The Front Row with Bud Rowe. I'll be there at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time in the morning. Phones will be open. Pat Trammell certainly could call in. Al Tuttle does call in, and the number is 870-930-3776. 870-930-3776. That's the last of our regular scheduled program this week. If there's late breaking news, we'll hop on with the Randy Hale Show to do that. And we have in the month of March planning that the semi-regular program, Randy Hale Show, to come out, and a non-wrestling, real life type of life stories type of thing. And we'll do that in the month of March. And we'll also next Monday be back with the Power Hour. I believe we will be watching show number 54. Then on next Tuesday night, we'll go back to the timeline of Memphis Wrestling, and we are going to be out of here right now. Thanks to the crew, Michael, Chris, Pat, and Adam Dunn. Thanks to you guys, and we'll see you next time. Until then, for Talking Memphis Wrestling, this is Randy Hales, and my cursor is checked, so I don't know if I can get out of here. I can get out of here now. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hale and special guests.